Welcome to the NRT Now podcast, giving you the latest in Christian music news, topics, and artist interviews directly from the largest Christian music site online, newreleasetoday.com. Now, here's your host, Jake.
Hey, welcome to episode 15, y'all. Hey, we are here with our, well, should we call you EDM expert, Mark?
Sure. I'll play that role today.
Yeah. Well, we are here with Mark Ryan, one of our awesome NRT staff members here as well. I would say your slice of the pie is kind of EDM as well as, you know, album reviews and just generally awesomeness.
Yeah, whatever they need me to do. EDM, hip hop, worship. If we can get it all in one song, then even better.
So is there one that encompasses it all? Is there the one master song?
No, there is not.
Dang it. We might have to work on that.
Not that does it well. Not that does it well anyways.
So, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about EDM. We haven't really done much of that, either podcast or I don't know if I've seen that much on the site yet. You know, just bits and pieces here and there.
No, and I think we haven't done a lot, just because I think due to the fact that EDM comes out in singles and it's not big album releases, and so as we have moved into the streaming world, I think the way that EDM releases or has released since its beginning, it was always on singles or kind of 2 tracks. Per side of each vinyl album. For some of our younger listeners, those used to exist back in the day, and they're making a comeback in some of your collections. So when EDM would release, it'd be a maxi single, and there'd be, you know, a couple tracks on one side and a couple on the other, and DJs would then create these records around, and you wanted it to be easy to select a track on a record, so find that groove. And so if it was at the beginning of the record, then even better. So and so now just the way we consume music in general through streaming, it's all singles, and that's the way the world's going. So I think EDM may have been ahead of the game in how they release music, but it's definitely has maintained that. And sure, there are some albums that come out, but people want fresh music for the dance floor, and so it's you know, especially with recording and producing software these days, you can get out a track in a couple weeks and have it ready for the dance floor, test it on the dance floor, clean it up, and then you can proceed to release it to the general public. So yeah.
You know, and I actually read a stat not long ago that vinyl is actually going to overtake CD sales for the first time ever, probably in the very near future.
Yeah, and that does not surprise me at all with kind of the renaissance of the vinyl album, and just the ability to touch and hold, and we got away from the ability to really appreciate album art, and a 12-inch vinyl LP kind of brings that back to seeing a complete work of art rather than just hearing some songs.
You know, in the quest for digital, it seems like, you know, everything's got to be crisp, it's got to be clear, it's got to be perfect. And I think there's some of the analog bits that just kind of give the music a little bit more life instead of just like not necessarily robotic, because, I mean, the music's still really real, you know, and recorded live and all that, but it just kind of gives it another layer to just kind of give it a little bit more of a homey feel. That's probably a very horrible way to describe it, but
yeah, I would think on vinyl what you get, it provides a warmth to the music, just the way, and it forces you to sit and listen. You can't consume a vinyl album on the go. You can't put it in. You can't put it on your device and go for a run with an album. You have to sit with it. You have to listen to it, and it in this day and age, I think, where everybody is so busy and forcing ourselves to be busy, to sit with a piece of art for an extended period of time and appreciate it. That's what vinyl allows us to do.
I gotta say, I was not expecting to talk about vinyl when we started this.
It's a good place to transition. I mean, from vinyl, I think, the first time I saw a record player, of course, was kind of in my parents' basement. But beyond that, through pop culture, the places we saw vinyl was DJs with their turntable decks. And whether it was a hip hop DJ or a club DJ, they spun vinyl. And so that's a perfect segue into EDM and dance music, and where we sit today with it as an overarching genre, and how we see it influencing a lot of the music that we consume today.
And even the modern DJ equipment still has the physical turntables. They're all digital controls now, but, so that is still carried through to, just even modern DJing and clubs and, dance.
Yeah, absolutely. A controller set of turntables. They have jog wheels, but very much mimics what a record player was.
So in Christian music, the last real, I would say EDM-ish kind of group that I remember was Owl City, which has been many ages ago. They kind of made a flash, in the kind of the mainstream of Christian music, if we can call it that. And since, it's, I personally haven't seen near as much, in the limelight. What's been kind of happening, since Owl City came on board?
Well, Owl City did an interesting thing, and yeah, they were electronic. I don't know if I would ever call them EDM. They were definitely electronic music, but I would have considered them more of a pop music, a pop electronic kind of music, not necessarily a pure EDM. But beyond that, today, like when I'm thinking of EDM, I mean, even before Owl City, we had guys like DJ Andy Hunter, who scored soundtracks of movies, and more recently his present series of albums that's tied in with art and poetry, and a whole app that he has. He's made, and I guess more on the chill hop trance kind of end of the EDM spectrum. But yeah, he's been around a long time and would be considered a pioneer. Lately, really, there's quite a few DJ / producers that are making music now, and we definitely see some of the influence in some of the worship music we listen to. But some artists, there's a guy named Kevin Alexander who has remixed quite a bit of work for what we would consider kind of like mainstream CCM artists. An artist by the name of Wild out of the UK has worked. We'll see kind of his name on remixes as well. Some of the groups that have been around for a bit is Jesus Loves Electro, LZ7. Then of course we have Transform. Used to be Transform DJs.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they used to be. I guess they used to be partners of NRT. Maybe when we still had the radio going. I know we sponsored their podcast and had their show on NRT radio. The beauty of EDM and why we might not see it that much kind of in our day-to-day interaction is it still does have a strong European presence. and so, or international presence. So when I was, I had the fortune to meet Toby Mack a couple of years ago, and we got to talking about Capital Kings and their acceptance.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he asked, why is like Capital Kings outsells like better in Canada and in South America than they do like in the US. And he just like wondered my thoughts on that. And it was interesting to hear that from him, that, Capital Kings was seeing kind of that their bigger crowd was in South America and Canada over the US. And it's just, so I think that's a good explanation of why EDM isn't kind of generally consumed in the CCM market, and sometimes we try and pigeonhole maybe some things into that or put that label, I guess, on some of the music that we might consume on a regular basis, because it might have some production notes that come from EDM, or from one of the many subgenres of EDM. It's international in its flavor, and that is and that's a beautiful thing about the Christian faith, is that uh, it's not based, in the West. It's not based in North America. There, and the Christian music that we hear every day isn't all that's out there. There's a big international scene of music out there that may be producing different types of music than we're used to hearing on a daily basis.
Yeah, so we've talked with, a couple of British artists over the years. We do quite a bit with, like Ellie Linebear and Martin Smith, Rivers and Robots, a few of the guys over, across the pond. You got Planet Shakers over in Australia, for King Country. And, although I wonder if they're considered American band by now. But yeah, I mean, you're right that, Christian music, music in general isn't, U.S. It's not, purely U.S. product. It's a very international product. And, just like everything else, flavors vary from region to region.
Absolutely. And so then we will see kind of that different influence. Like we see a lot of EDM influence in, I think when we first started singing worship music, it was coming through in the Hillsong Young and Free stuff was our first, maybe largest, if we want to say CCM mainstream kind of impact with it. I think it might have been Young and Free. If you weren't looking out for and listening specifically for, kind of what I would call more purist versions of EDM, with stuff that stuff that would get festival plays, or even, larger club plays. Because at times I find myself surprised when I listen to certain artists, and all of a sudden they've appeared at Ibiza, which is kind of the largest party island. But we've got some Christian artists, or perhaps this is the Christian artist versus artist that is Christian mind game that some of us play. But for lack of a better term, Christian artists are playing large festivals, and they're playing some of the largest clubs on the planet, and basically spinning for Jesus. But they're doing it in kind of that covert way. They're breaking into a culture that was never necessarily open to God. But as I heard one artist put it, his name's DJ King Arthur. Listened to a podcast with him recently, and he made a very excellent point that the club culture and electronic music, it really is it's feeding a desire that these people have to reach something larger. And so it is a spiritual experience for them. It's just perhaps the wrong spirit that they're getting an experience from. So when it comes to rave culture, club culture, I think that there's a field out there that's ripe, and it's kind of infiltrating that, but it's going to come in a covert way, and no different than how some of the heavier Christian rock or Christian metal stuff, the same way that they would go into a venue and headline some dank clubs, but still they'll rock for Jesus and minister afterwards, but they're going to the places that some of us just wouldn't feel comfortable.
You're talking about feeling comfortable. I rolled through Vegas one day when probably the biggest rave of the year was going on in Vegas, and let me tell you, that was an experience. I tried to apply for hazard pay, and that got summarily denied. But yeah, that was, imagine a rave and then Vegas and them together, and it was an interesting night. Let's just put it that way. But I mean, you're right. I mean, there's a huge environment there that show literally had a drug drop at the door to say, no questions asked, just drop the drugs at the door and, carry about your business. I mean, there's that whole huge need and just kind of an empty spot there that, it's awesome to see when music goes and fills those empty spots, whether it's rock or, EDM or, whatever the genre is, it's awesome to go into those places where it's the darkest. Hip hop is another good area. We talked with Gala, our friend Gala a while ago about, hip hop and all that. And it's always awesome to see, people who are Christians making music and, not necessarily being Christian music per se. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the industry as a whole to kind of embracing that a little bit. We talked with Seth Mosley, producer in the CCM world a while ago, and their studio, Full Circle Music, is kind of running down that road a little bit of people are Christians, but they're not necessarily producing music in the Christian music, the CCM, under that flag.
Oh, absolutely.
We were talking just a little bit beforehand about how EDM isn't just encompassing of, or isn't a genre in and of itself. It's kind of more of a overarching umbrella. What all do we see underneath that EDM umbrella?
Okay, I'm gonna try and run through some stuff super quick. I don't know if you put notes in some show notes in or not, but I got some links to an article from Complex and a YouTube video from DJ producer Laidback Luke. Kind of runs through a lot of this stuff that I'm going to run through if the listeners want to kind of dive in more into the genres within EDM. But I'm going to start kind of with my favorite style, which is kind of the house stuff. And so we got bass house, 126 BPM. It's kind of got a growly dubstep bass line. I think we're all familiar with kind of what that dubstep sounds like, kind of robotic, kind of harsh, low end. But bass house is a little slower. It's 126 BPM, and it builds and drops like normal EDM does. In future house, you still have those housey beats, more melody to it. It could have some R&B influence in it, and then it still runs above that 126 BPM. Then there's just regular house music. So house is just defined. It's made for a smaller room, basically, is what defines house from techno. Techno is for a bigger room, and house is for a smaller room. So house music, 126 to 128 BPM, flirts with big room stuff. Then you get into G house, which kind of brings in some hip hop vocals, drops into like more of a deep bass line, and there's not a lot of overarching synth in it. Deep house is more repetitive. It drops rather into like a deep bass line, it drops more into a funky line, and the bass is deeper still. Then we can move into kind of the more futuristic sounding stuff, robotic sounding, if you would. So we got dubstep, 140 BPM, really harsh low end synths. I think the classic dubstep artist that people may have heard of is Skrillex. And then then you get into trap music. So trap, of course, has that hip hop influence with the really deep low end, but it's a cleaner low end than dubstep. Runs around 150 BPM, and that 808 kick sound, that really clean kick sound, kind of drives the line for that. And it's got some festival type squeaks on the lead synth. So kind of that chipmunk sound that we've all become so familiar with on the top end of some of our music. And then you get into future bass. It's more melodic than trap. Runs 140 to 150 BPM, more synthy, more vocals. Actually, good future bass is really pleasant to listen to. And then the list just keeps going. Like there's Dutch house and big house, progressive big room. There's kind of the catch-all techno, which is just that. It's more techno-y sounding, so it doesn't have like the deep bass like a deep house does, but it would be what a lot of us would have been familiar with, or at least people my age, from the mid '90s when kind of EDM came across the pond, kind of the first big time, and you got the sounds coming out of Detroit, and you had the stuff coming over from the UK, and guys like Carl Cox were releasing big records, and so that was techno. And then you get into like trance, which is really popular on the festival scene, of course. It's like anywhere from 110 to 150, really repetitive builds and drums, and it's just that it puts you in a trance. Honestly, I get tired of listening to trance. It just, I don't like to say that all music sounds the same, but to me, just trance all just seems to sound the same to me, and it doesn't give kind of that same differentiation as some of the house genres do. And then we get into like some really wild stuff, like hard style, kind of 150 BPM, really distorted kicks, catchy melodies, or then you get really frenetic with drum and bass, 160, 180 BPM. So now you're at the top of the range. There's a big focus on drums, of course. And then what I would think the exact opposite of the spectrum is from drum and bass is you get down tempo, lo-fi, or chill hop, which might be considered like lounge chill music or things like that. I really enjoy some down tempo lo-fi Christmas music this time of year because you can just put it on, listen all day, and not really get tired of it. And it doesn't get in the way of your day. But so if people are looking for a different kind of Christmas vibe this year, check out some down tempo Christmas stuff or lounge chill Christmas stuff. And I think it might make your holiday season just a little more relaxed.
Well, I've got to say my head is completely spinning. I was not prepared for what I was getting myself into there by any stretch. That's just a little bit. I will gladly reinforce the expert title for you here. The EDM expert is very accurate. Wow.
And there's still so much to learn. When I got a DJ controller a couple of years ago for Christmas, and that was kind of my entry into EDM because I wanted to learn how to mix properly and things like that. And so, what better way than to learn from DJs and producers that do it for a living and just to begin to understand. And that's when my mind was blown too, that what in the world is the difference between, future house and deep house, and trying to catch those differences in the genres. Yeah, at the end of the day, in my mind, it's still all techno, because that's the era I grew up in. That's what it was called. That's what I still call it. But there's definitely that feeling flowing through stuff. And especially, in some of these latest albums coming out, and, believe you've got an interview with Tauren Wells in this episode.
Yep.
His latest track, Closer, definitely has that EDM influence. Definitely some what I would consider more, maybe a little techno vibe in there. I don't know if I'd call it house or not, but definitely there is that feeling in that song, and some of Elevation Worship's latest stuff. There's been that feeling, and like I said earlier, Young and Free has a lot of that influence, and then even some of our CCM kind of more pop people are starting to lean on some of that influence. And since I would say about 2016, we've seen a really big influence in our music with EDM, especially in the Christian zone. I mean, I think it was happening in the mainstream areas a little before that. But when Justin Bieber's Purpose album came out in 2015, I think it set a new tone for what people wanted to hear. And so we saw, about a year later, we started to see a lot of Christian music with that EDM influence. What Skrillex and Diplo did with Purpose on the production on that, I think really set a stage and a tone for what people wanted to hear. And it was I remember distinctly, it was about a year later that I remember hearing very similar sound profiles and things in some of the CCM music. And yeah, it's continued on, and it's gotten popular, and that's kind of where we sit today.
Personally, I'm loving the infusion of, that coming in, and although I'm a huge fan of fusions to start with, but I'm loving hearing that come through, and hearing more and more of that. Thank you, Justin Bieber. I didn't think that those would ever be words that I'd say, but here we are.
There you go.
So, you mentioned that, we have Tauren Wells, a little bit later on, he has his song Closer is the one that we were talking about, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he's getting really close to releasing his next full album, which,
right.
I'm excited about. He's all over the place, from Michael Jackson to, the Michael Jackson vibes to Closer, and just to Worship. I mean, this album is going to be incredible.
I would have to say that, I mean, CCM generally is not my bag. I'm not afraid to admit that. Just generally not my jam. But Tauren Wells, I can get down with. I think he's an incredibly talented artist. That song Miracle has been on repeat in my house, and has spontaneous dance party kind of tune. And I think it is just that throwback to that Michael Jackson sound, but he does it so well, and it doesn't feel like a cheap imitation, but it just feels like somebody stepping into their own and doing what they want to do.
I'd like to also take the moment to mention that you're our northern neighbor. It's funny to think that we're south of the border for you guys.
Yeah,
a completely different perspective. But we're talking about just how conversations need to happen, and we're seeing a little bit more through the Christian music, a lot in the CHH realm. Some through the gospel genre, sorry. And like I said, we, Tauren's article that came out, not long ago and all that. We have Mandisa that's coming out with some awesome music. Toby Mac's drummer has also come out talking, just being a little bit more open about what's going on, not just America, but I mean, I think these things are global. I mean, we're not the first people to have issues within borders or differences of opinions or anything like that. I think that's even biblical if we're going to go there. But one of the things, I mean, that's that's been going on since the beginning of time. And I just wanted to, just kind of touch a little bit on just being able to have conversations, not necessarily, to talk about the content or validity or anything like that. That's a whole different podcast, and I think that's under the political category if you want to go for there. But one of the things that I love about our group at NRT is we have those conversations around the music internally through our group chat. I think Christian music is doing a good job about starting to step out and starting to bring those conversations to light. So I just wanted to kind of hear what you thought from north of the border.
We've got our own issues up here, but I don't want to generalize like how Americans think of Canada. But perhaps socialist comes to mind, but definitely we're not. We're just as much capitalists as Americans are, just a little friendlier about it, maybe.
Friendlier, I think, would be a good generalization if I speak for the American camp here.
But when and kind of my personal history and family dynamic kind of leads to perhaps a different mindset than even a lot of Canadians would have anyways. I think it is important that we have these conversations and that we don't shy away from them. We've got our own issues up here with our version of the GMA, Gospel Music Association. We have a Canadian one too, and we've got our Canadian awards. And each year I look at the nominees for hip hop, and I think one artist this year might be nominated for 3 of the hip hop awards. He had one of the songs is his, and 2 of the other songs he featured on. So it doesn't reflect what the Canadian Christian hip hop scene really is, and that's a problem that the Canadian GMA doesn't have the wherewithal to go out and maybe get some of these artists to at least to submit their music for the awards, or maybe there's an issue with the submission process and how that happens. But so I think in that case, as much as people think that Canada's this, as Hassan Minaj pointed out in Patriot Act in his episode with our Prime Minister, and he referred to us as Wakanada. It's not really. We have our issues, and especially I would think in the Christian realm, and we don't have these discussions in Canada because we're too nice. But
the apology would be, I would say, one of the things that we generalize about the Canadians.
The apology might come quickly, but it might not come at all because of just unrecognizing of maybe something was done improperly. I guess I saw the GMA's reaction to Kirk Franklin to his statement. Didn't see a reaction from TBN, if there was one at all. Did see one from the GMAs. I saw what Kirk Franklin said. I heard what he said. Both full length, acceptance speeches. They weren't political. They were gracious and honoring and wanted to drive a conversation forward, but some people weren't willing to have that conversation. I just don't think that anybody, on this side of the border would ever stand on the stage and say those things to begin with. So I'm happy for the conversation. I'm happy that we have it within our group. Some of the inside baseball of NRT is we're all different. We're all different. We're all different backgrounds of Christian faith, whether we're Baptist or Pentecostal or Catholic, or non-denominational. Yep. Whatever it might be. So we come from all realms. evangelical mainline church, whatever you want to call it. So within that, you get a lot of different viewpoints, and then you throw in the couple Canadians we have, and it's completely different viewpoints again. Yeah, so the conversation has to be had. We can't be afraid of the conversation. We have to, I think, tread cautiously on assuming other people's intentions behind certain statements and comments, because there may not be an intention, a negative intention there at all, but rather just for lack of a better term, an ignorance towards it, that it might be true. But when the conversation can happen properly and openly, and then there can be that openness to, like, okay, there might be an issue there might actually be a valid point there, but let's not get stuck on that. There's probably ways forward beyond it. So I think that's why the conversation's important, so that, as Stephen Covey said, in the seminal 7 Habits book, is, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I think that's just really good counsel, especially at this time when there's just so much political fighting going on. I think that's an important kind of tenet to live by. And, of course, there's always, the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I think that's extremely important. I want you to listen to me, so I should take a minute and listen to you as well. So,
and I think you absolutely nailed it. I mean, the conversations, need to be had, and, and respectfully, and listening to, and not just preaching at each other, until somebody submits and cries uncle. It needs to be, a respectful conversation, and to seek to understand each other and where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I love where Tauren talks about that. And at the end of the day, if it's something you disagree upon, you agreed to disagree, and you still love your brother, your sister that you're talking to, and whether it's, not understanding, or whether it's just, flat disagreement, whatever it is, at the end of the day, we're still siblings, in the kingdom, and just retaining that love, is the biggest piece. And I think, we as Christians, have the ability, or have the responsibility to show, non-believers, how that's done, how we can still disagree, and how we can have these conversations without, biting each other's heads off, and becoming enemies if, you think that wall should be blue instead of yellow, or, something. Some of the stuff just seems trivial at the end of the day to me, maybe not quite that trivial, but still, and I think, I really think that Tauren nails that, just about having the conversations, talking about ideas before we get down to attacking people.
Right.
So, and that's something that I very much cherish within our group, is we're able to have those conversations, and even if we don't all see it eye to eye, we're still a group. We're still Christians. We're still looking to talk about Christian music and how Christian music impacts people. And that's really what's important at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I don't know if everybody's had enough of me talking yet. I mean, you've been laying down the stuff, but we'll see. But I think we're about ready to hear from Tauren. So let's head on that way. Thank you for co-hosting and blowing my mind with the EDM side, Mark.
Yeah, no problem, Jake. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Tauren, thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
So you are on your headlining tour. I think you're out in California this week, right?
Yes, sir. We're in Sacramento, wrapping up the last 4 shows of the tour, which is crazy.
Well, by the time this will air, I think the tour will be over. So
cool.
We'll call this a wrap up here.
Cool.
But I don't know if you remember, I think it was in February or March when we caught up with you here that I told you that I thought this tour was going to be insane. I don't know if you remember that at all or not.
I don't remember that. I wish that I did because I could have used a little bit of encouragement going into this thing.
Um, well, I'll have to replay that later just to make sure that I wasn't imagining things. But um, no, I from everything that I've seen and I've heard, I mean, it's been an incredible tour. Um,
It's been
I
amazing, man.
I was not able to attend it when it came through Fort Worth, unfortunately, with scheduling and everything.
Yeah.
But I am so bummed that I missed it because everything that I've seen, I've heard from our NRT team to social media to everything says it's just been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's been really amazing. God's really blessed it. The Fort Worth show was funny because I had the flu. So
Oh no.
that was not the best show of the tour, although some people didn't realize that I was sick. So I guess that's a good thing. I don't really know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, so the Fort Worth show was kind of wonky, but overall this has been an amazing experience. I was really nervous about trying to get out and do my own thing, and it's just been great. I don't really ever want to go back.
Well, I mean that's a problem because in the spring, summer, you're going out on the Hits Deep tour with Toby Mac, and
Yes.
I don't know how that's going to work trying to go back to the headliner for when you're on tour with Toby Mac.
Yeah, well, he's definitely not going to let me do that. Uh, the challenging part of that is I think my set is 20 minutes. So, we're doing a hour and a half set out here, and it's just we get to take our time. So it's going to be hard to dial it back to 20 minutes. But I'm really excited about being out with Toby and his team and his crew, just because I love those guys. So I'm looking forward to that.
I mean, looking at that lineup, that lineup's going to be insane. You got Cochran and company as well. Um, we are messengers, I believe. I mean,
Yep.
that's going to be a good night overall.
Yeah, Jordan Felice and Ryan Stevenson. It's gonna be great, man. I'm pumped.
So, with your headlining tour here, what has been kind of the biggest breakout between being kind of the opener or second to last to now this being your tour and you headliner and everybody's coming to see you?
Yeah. Well, at first I felt like there was a lot of pressure in that, but also I play shows all the time where it's just me and my team, my band. So it had a very familiar feel to it. I just felt like there's more responsibility and really giving people a full experience, not just something entertaining, but taking them into God's presence and letting them experience God's joy and peace and goodness. So I really designed the night for that, to be a unique experience, something different than they are getting when they go to any other show in Christian music or outside of Christian music, but also having that spiritual element where they leave feeling built up in their faith. And so I hope that's what people walk away with.
And has your time, leading worship at Lakewood kind of played a little bit play into that, or is this just who Tauren is?
I think it's just a part of who I am and what I'm called to do. You know, everything that I do flows out of who I'm called to be. So getting to lead worship at Lakewood is just the overflow of who I feel like I've been called to be. I'm a worship leader. I love people and like getting into the trenches with people, not just coming into a city and dropping a joy bomb, which is great, but I like knowing that I'm in it for the long haul with people. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of an overflow of who I am. And then that carries over into everything else that I do.
Like we talked about when I think it was February when we caught up. I don't know, is it just me or is like 2019 just flown by?
It's been so quick.
Yeah, I think it was February, March that I was talking to you, and now all of a sudden I'm shopping for turkeys and pumpkin pie.
Yeah, man. It
Um,
moves quickly.
Man, it's crazy. But when we were talking, then we talked a little bit about you coming in from Royal Taylor, and yeah, I don't know why I didn't realize that you were leading up Royal Taylor. So I guess I've been a Tauren Wells fan for quite a while now.
Yeah.
But what's that kind of journey been like from Royal Taylor, and you had all the award nominations and all the nods there to where you're at now with Tauren Wells, and you're working on your third album coming out, if I remember.
It'll be my second solo album. Yeah.
Second. I was trying to give you
Um,
extra credit here.
yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Um,
That journey was uh, an opportunity for a lot of growth and a lot of learning. Relationally, I learned a lot and how to end a season, how not to end a season with friends, with people you love and work closely with. It was an education for me in a lot of ways. And it was also a refining of what I felt like was most important in my life. And I was able to get down to the root of my calling and my purpose. So that was difficult because sometimes, you realize that your purpose doesn't always line up with the people that are around you. And there has to be a separation from the pack. And that was that season for me. But now being on the other side of that, I can look back and see how God's hand was absolutely in it, not just for me, but for all of us that were in Royal Taylor. And now I really feel like I'm walking in what I was designed to do for this season of my life. So the goal for me is not success. The goal for me is obedience and faithfulness. So I'm sure, for me, Royal Taylor was an Isaac, so to speak. It was something that I felt like was God given, but also that needed to be given back. And I think that I will experience that over and over again in my life. But for right now, I'm just enjoying the season that we're in.
I guess I'll take the opposite approach. What have you taken from your time on the road and the headlining tour? And I guess what are you going to be taking back to just, I don't want to say the routine, but um, your time leading back at Lakewood? What are you bringing back to like your corporate Sunday style worship?
I'm the same. I wish there was a better. I think the touring impacts the way that I tour and do shows. So much like how a church conference stretches a church, builds momentum, galvanizes a vision, brings people together. A lot of times that's what conferences can do within a church setting. I feel like a tour for an artist does much of the same thing. It builds your team, you raise the bar, you learn a lot, you galvanize your team around a vision. And so, from a touring perspective, there are a lot of things that I think will carry forward from this. Uh, a level of professionalism that we've risen to that we won't go back on. Excellence is always moving forward and raising the bar. So I think that because this team carries the spirit of excellence, we will carry that forward. But from a worship leading standpoint, my approach is going to be the same. You know, my role at Lakewood is to serve the vision of the team, the worship pastor, and ultimately Pastor Joel. So it's very different. Me touring and being an artist is the vision I feel like God has given me to facilitate. When I step into my Lakewood role, I'm there as a role player to fulfill a specific, unique thing that God has placed me there for to serve the vision of Pastor Joel. So it's different, you know.
It,
And I'm trying to figure out the places that my perspective is welcome in that context and where it isn't, because it's not my thing. So it's much more of a servant posture in my Lakewood role versus a leader posture as an artist.
The reason I ask is because you've got that kind of that unique in between where you're recording kind of solo artist, but you also have your time at Lakewood as well. You're not a worship band, but you're not a dedicated artist as well. So it's kind of a interesting blend as I look at what you're doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely unique and different.
The episode before this one is Elevation Worship, and we talked a little bit about your collab with Chris and the guys, and I didn't get the chance to fact check to see if they enjoyed the time working with you or not too. You said you did. I didn't get to hear from them on that one. No. So that's still not fact checked yet, but
That's funny.
no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But like I said, you have those guys, and I heard a lot of that from them as well. Is just that time of just renewing and stretching and growth out on the road with Hillsong and Casting Crowns as well. And
that's exactly it, man. And for me, I feel called to the local church. I think that things that are successful and have longevity globally are planted locally. So I have prioritized the local church in my life and in touring in our family. And so that's something that it's kind of a non-negotiable for us. We're going to be a part of the church in some capacity. So
that really shows from like your social media. As I scroll through my Instagram feed or Facebook feed or whichever, I see that you're not just posting about the tour, you're not just posting about the awesome things that are happening, but it's scripture. There's devotionals pretty much every day. It seems like that you're pushing out. It's not just about the musicianship; it's about the ministry.
yeah, man. I mean, I feel like the platforms that God graces us with are to encourage and build up other people. So I try to and endeavor to use my platform to help other people, encourage people, share hope, promote other people. Like, it's not just about me. And it helps me keep my head on straight to know that that's the purpose and that's the intention. So yeah, that's the focus that I have.
Just a month or so back, you were interviewed for a CNN article, just to switch gears just a shade.
Yeah.
Talking definitely a politically charged post, and I talked with John Cooper a little while ago about this article as well.
Yeah.
But I have to say, in the context of the article and kind of the leading question of the article, I guess I love the responses that you had in this article, man. I was thoroughly impressed.
Well, thank you.
And so the article, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, I mean the title is why Christian music's biggest stars refuse to change their tune for the Trump era, and I think the interview was in Atlanta. Is that where
Yes.
that
Yep.
came from?
Yep.
And so the leading question was talking about why Christian artists aren't. I'll use my Jake standard version of this of saying, why aren't Christian musicians trashing Trump? And your response was basically, to not attack, uh, our leadership. And
Yep.
I mean, like, so that's a pro grade response there.
Yeah. I think that so many times culture wants us to respond the way culture responds to things, but we are not of the culture. We are in the culture, but we aren't of the culture. So our responses to things happening in culture are not the same as those who are products of the culture. So, and I don't think that the interviewer understood that when he set up this conversation with me. Uh, I believe in what the Bible says. I believe that honor is a lost art in our culture,
Oh, absolutely.
that people don't even understand or know where to start when it comes to honoring each other and authority. And so, in the case of the president, I don't care who the president is or who your option is, who your guy is, I'm not going to criticize a a president. I don't care who it is. I have the option as an American to vote what I believe in. That is how my voice is heard. And there's opportunities to get in rooms with people, to have conversations with people. There are, my point was, and he didn't write this in the article, which was the most frustrating thing about it, was that you don't have to respond the way that culture responds to be actively pursuing justice in the world. There are
Yeah.
different ways that you pursue justice. It's okay if someone needs to go stand in the street and protest, they're free to do that. But someone needs to be sitting at the table having conversations with people, building relationships with people, and creating change that way. So it's not just a one size fits all response to the things that we disagree with in culture. And especially for the Christian, we respond differently. And that's what makes us different.
That would be frustrating because that definitely did not come through, in the end article at all. And
No,
that.
it was written very biased. And that's, I mean, the irony of this is the article was written to really posture, once again, the church being as a whole being for Trump, which I don't think the church as a whole is for Trump. I think, there are people that voted in support and all of that, but also it wanted to write from a biased standpoint. And this is exactly what President Trump talks about with the media, particularly with CNN, that you cannot trust the integrity of their journalism. And I have the recording of my conversation with the interviewer. And if you heard the full context of our conversation, you would realize that that article was written completely biased and left out so much information that I shared from my perspective. And it was a 30-minute conversation where they only pulled two of my quotes.
Oh
So
my goodness.
there was no actual effort to find the truth. And I actually told him that when he was asking me these questions. I said, I think that we have a responsibility for someone with a microphone as myself or someone with a pen like yourself to share the whole story to the best of our abilities, to communicate in a way that is unveiled. And of course, that didn't make it into what was published either. So it was very, very disappointing that I would give someone tickets to my show, let them come in, take my time, take photos, sit down, time out of my day, and have a 30-minute conversation. And I even said, like, the reason why I'm taking this interview is because I think in our culture, we have comments and not conversations, that we are just driven by a 140 character world. And of course, that didn't make it in. So, really, I felt like it was a waste of time. He could have written that article without me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two quotes in there, and I think, and John Cooper and I were talking, as some of our listeners have heard in that episode there, I think the thing that really got to me the most through that article was, saying that Christian musicians are talking for a higher purpose. They're talking beyond politics. They're talking beyond politicians. They're calling, for the love of Christ. And kind of transcending all this, but somehow that's still yet not good enough for, this particular article.
It was unfortunate. The thing that is unfortunate to me is it was such a great opportunity to share a different perspective, and it wasn't shared. So it was very disheartening.
You're just a year younger than I am, and we're square. We're on that upper edge of the millennial demographic, which
Mm-hmm.
I try to deny that as much as I can. I try and tie into the Zennials, but I get shot down every time for that.
Yeah, no, you just gotta own it, bro.
I think I think you're right. There's a lot of comments, and especially kind of coming from our generation, and I've seen so many comments like, my dad's so smart, I'm so wise, I listen to him, but he just won't agree with me on this. Instead of
Yeah.
taking that position to sit and listen and have those conversations,
Yeah.
and kind of going back to that respect thing that we're talking a little bit ago, it's like, why, if you respect your parents or, people that much, then why aren't you sitting down to listen and have those conversations?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I have conversations like this with my parents. I think we are better when we are talking. So you have to be able, it is the arrogant that cannot hear the viewpoint of another person. You have to be humble enough to accept that you don't know everything and that your viewpoint may be wrong. And you may get down to the bottom of it and you don't agree. But that's okay. You don't have to agree to love. We don't have to be twins to be brothers. There's room for our differences. But we have to acknowledge that we are, in fact, different and then decide to love each other anyways. That's what real unity is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I keep repeating over and over again, mostly outside the podcast, but is that there are problems, there are things that are happening, there is a lot of stuff like that, and we do need to be having conversations. And I think the kind of the misconception is because we're not saying exactly what people want us to say, that we're not having quote unquote the conversation.
Right.
And so I say, it's not that conversations don't need to be had. It's the question of what are the conversations that need to be had.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it. I think first and foremost, our identity needs to be in Christ. I am a Christian. I am a Christ follower. And then all the other stuff falls after that. Whether it be race or gender or whatever it is. Our identity primarily, first and foremost, is in Christ.
Yes. And that's the concept of my album Citizen of Heaven. It's that we are no longer strangers and foreigners because we are strangers and foreigners. This world is not our home. But now our citizenship rests in a higher place. We're citizens of heaven. And that citizenship now means there's neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female, slave nor free. That we've all been called into one body, into one faith, and that even though we are different and unique and will have different viewpoints, we are all citizens of the same kingdom. And so we lay down our differences for the advancement of the kingdom. And that is, I think, what we have to be reminded of is that we have a citizenship that's higher than my citizenship as an American or as an Australian, or fill in the blank of what country or continent you're on, because the cross unites continents, it unites countries, it unites cultures. And so the church is diverse, it's unique, it's filled with different colors and flavors and streams, and we should celebrate that and hear each other and see each other and fight for each other, and but ultimately we lift up the name of Jesus.
Yeah, and I wish I planned that segue into your new album, or I wish I could say I planned that, but that just happened that way.
Well,
Um,
Jake, I'm a pro, so I saw the opening and I just went for it.
Man, that all credit for that smooth segue goes to you, man. That was incredible. So we have 3 singles out from that right now,
Yeah.
and I think the last one that came out was what was the title of that one?
Perfect Peace.
Perfect Peace. And that one had a little bit of Michael Jackson vibe to it. Is a lot of what I heard it. I actually saw that before I heard it, and I'm like, I get it. Like that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 songs out. One is called Miracle. One is called Close. And one is called Perfect Peace. I think the one you're referencing is Miracle. It's
That's
Michael
right.
Jackson vibe all day.
That's
And
right.
then Close is like more of an EDM approach to a really amazing idea. And then Perfect Peace is a smooth pop ballad that, man, I just love the melody and the message of it. It's really special.
So in the last episode, Kevin and I talked consistently about how we're terrible with song names. So you're right. It was Miracle that I was thinking about.
Yes, sir.
I'll get it straight someday, maybe. No promises.
You're good.
But I mean, just incredible. And so the rest of the album comes out in January, is what I'm understanding.
That's right. January 24th, Citizen of Heaven. Get ready.
Man, I'm excited for that. Like to what we've heard so far. I mean, if it's anything like that, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, man. I'm excited for people to hear it.
One of the things that I like to do, at the end of the podcast, at the end of the interview here, is to just kind of give an open mic. I mean, we've heard a lot of, kind of what your heart around, the Citizen of Heaven is and all that. Is there anything else kind of there that you want to share that's on your heart?
I think it's just reiterating that get into a room, sit down with somebody and have a conversation. You don't conflict sometimes gets a negative conflict can be negative. Conflict can also be very productive. And if you're willing to have conversations early around issues, then you save yourself from having arguments later around people. And so your viewpoint and your opinion is going to come out. You choose whether or not it comes out around an issue or it comes out around a person. So it's important that you're having conversations around issues and ideas so that it doesn't become a personal attack. And I would just encourage people, man, sit down, get coffee, get a meal, and talk through things. Talk through life things, talk through relationship things. Don't just sweep them under the rug. It's not dead. You may have buried it, but those things are buried alive and they're coming back up. And yeah, that would be my benediction today.
I understand that your wife's going to be there in just a little while to hang out on the road with, these last few stops here for you. So, I mean,
Yep.
that's super exciting. So I will, we'll let you get back to it there. Let those guys experience the awesomeness of this tour. And we really appreciate you hanging out with us for a bit.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, bro.